I was devastated. Sonia was dead. Sanya was killed in an explosion. Camille was dead. Melvina was raped and kidnapped. I have no idea where Mirko, Mehmet, and Kamal were. I thought Dragan had betrayed us, leading to this tragic situation, but he didn't. I lost all my dear friends I had made in this country during this terrible internal conflict. I feel completely alone and lost, not knowing how to fill the void in my heart. Among my friends, I was the only Japanese boy, and ironically, I was the only one who survived. When I was 6 or 7 years old, I was abandoned by my mother due to complicated domestic circumstances. Eventually, my mother relinquished custody, and my father made the decision to take custody of me and brought me to Serbia, where he had been working for a long time. Unexpectedly, I found myself living with my father in Serbia 30 years ago. The town where I started living with my father was very small, with a population of only a few thousand people, called Kalinovic in Serbia. Compared to urban areas of Japan, the population density in this town was remarkably low. The town was situated in a basin surrounded by mountains, and the buildings in the town had a beautiful unity. 30 years ago, I had never seen houses with orange roofs in Japan, so I found it to be quite unique. Usually, when a child immigrates to the country where their parents work, they will likely attend an international school that follows the compulsory education curriculums of their home country. However, in my case, things were different. There were no Japanese people in the town where I lived, and there was no international school available. My father and I were the only Japanese people in that town. I had no choice but to attend the local public school that the local children went to. I didn't fully understand what my classmates were talking about. I always felt alone whenever I was at school. It was obvious because I couldn't even introduce myself in front of my classmates when I first joined the public school due to my language barrier. If I had been older and more socially adept, able to interact with classmates without relying on language, things might have been different. However, I lacked the social skills to connect with my classmates without language. The first 2 weeks after enrolling in the school were hell for me. Enduring loneliness was mentally overwhelming for a kid like me who longed to actively play with other friends. So after school, I often took walks around the town by myself to distract my mind from the profound sense of loneliness. However, I would frequently lose my way, and the locals would kindly help me and guide me back home. One day, as I was walking towards school, I noticed some kids playing soccer in the empty lot at the end of the road I was walking on. I couldn't help but feel envious. If there had been an opportunity, I would have loved to join them, but I couldn't because I didn't speak Serbian. Thus, I stood there silently, watching them play from behind a building wall. I could see the longing in my eyes as I watched them play soccer, hoping to join their team. One of the boys playing soccer noticed me and approached me. "Would you like to join us?" he asked. I didn't understand his words, but I could sense his invitation from the friendly atmosphere. His name was Camille. Thanks to his kind approach and excessive gestures, I managed to grasp the essence of what he was saying. I was overjoyed to have the opportunity to play soccer with them. It was the first time I had interacted with local children, and I felt an immense excitement at making a new friend in Serbia, a place so unfamiliar and far away from Japan. Kalinovic, where I lived, belonged to Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was a constituent country of the Union of Yugoslavia at that time. In this country, Bosnian, Serbian, and Croatian people coexisted. The soccer team consisted of boys from diverse races. On the next day, I came across boys playing soccer in an empty lot the other day at school. It was a very small town. They also went to the same school I went to. After school, I spotted Camille and the other boys playing soccer in the schoolyard. I hurried over to join them. And to my surprise, Camille ran towards me and invited me to play soccer with them. This time, there were even more classmates gathered in the schoolyard compared to the previous day. Though I could only communicate through gestures, it was the perfect opportunity for me to bond and interact with my new local friends. From that day onwards, I joined my local friends in playing soccer and tag every day, even though I couldn't understand their language. The circle of local friends I spent time with gradually grew, and I started looking forward to going to school each day. In particular, Camille and Dragan went out of their way to visit my classroom during every break, even though they had classes in a different room. We always found something fun to do together. On some days, I couldn't play with them due to their religious reasons. During those times, I explored various places that were rarely seen in Japan, such as a vast and beautiful plain that stretched as far as the eye could see. It was incredibly exciting for me. One day, while Dragan and Camille went to the mosque and church, I decided to explore the town on my own. During my exploration, I stumbled upon a rundown house located at the top of a hill. Assuming it was an abandoned house where nobody lived, I couldn't resist the temptation to sneak onto the property. As I entered the yard of the house, I unexpectedly came across a girl who seemed to be around the same age as me. It became clear to me that someone actually lived in this house. I thought I would run away from her, but I politely introduced myself to her in Japanese after all. Then she understood that I introduced myself in a different language. She also introduced herself to me, and she gave me bean snacks. Her name was Sonia. It took me from 1 to 2 hours from children to get from her house to the city center of the town on foot. But she didn't go to school that I went to. That's why I didn't know her. We played together in White Plains, picking flowers and creating floral decorations. As the time passed, I noticed that it was getting dark around the area where we were playing. Realizing that I needed to return home, Sonia's father kindly came all the way to where we were and thankfully offered to drive me back to the town where I lived. Actually, Sonia also got on a car and followed us. Her father expressed his gratitude for being his daughter's friends on her way to my town. As we arrived and stepped out of the car, Sonia placed a flower crown that we had made together on my head and bid me farewell. During the long summer vacation, I continued to play with the same group of friends in the empty lot every day. However, thoughts of Sonia lingered in my mind, and I longed to meet her and play together again. She didn't have many friends and often spent her time alone. It was for this reason that I decided to visit her at her house and play with her. I wanted to bring her happiness and help her make more friends. I proposed the idea to my friends, and they all agreed to visit Sonia's house and play with her. We made a promise to visit Sonia's house together on the following Sunday. However, my thoughts were consumed by Sonia, even when I was alone. Unable to wait until the agreed-upon day, I couldn't resist the desire to visit Sonia's house with Camille beforehand. From the moment I saw her, I knew I had fallen in love with Sonia at first sight. She was stunningly beautiful, like a perfect doll. Every moment spent with her was filled with joy, and I yearned to be by her side every day. The anticipation of our next meeting became almost unbearable, and I found myself eagerly looking forward to it each day. We engaged in various childlike activities during our visits. We would pick flowers, create floral decorations, play house, and spend time with dolls. On one occasion, when Sonia's father was present at the house during our visits, he took us hunting in the forest. It was an exciting and memorable experience. Sonia's mother always warmly welcomed us into their home, never showing any signs of irritation. She would prepare delicious lunches and treats for us each time I visited. Her kindness and hospitality made our time together even more enjoyable. On the next day, as we promised, my school friends and I, a total of 8 people including Camille, Mirko, Mehmet, Kamal, Dragan, Sanya, Melvina, and myself went to Sonia's house. I purposely didn't inform her beforehand to surprise her. As mentioned earlier, Sonia's house was quite far from the city center, taking us 1 or 2 hours to walk from where we lived. It felt like a small excursion, so we all prepared backpacks with snacks and water bottles. We walked across a wide plateau and climbed up the hill where our house was located. we called out to Sonia loudly from outside our house. She slowly opened the door and cautiously looked around. As soon as she saw us, her eyes widened in surprise. I said to her, "I brought my school friends here. Why don't we all play together?" Sonia, however, seemed frightened and said, "I'm sorry, I'm scared, because I've never played with such a large group of people before." However, upon reflecting on it now, I realized that our sudden visit with a group of 8 people without prior notification or acceptance was extremely rude. 3 girls who had come with me warmly invited Sonia to play together in front of the entrance. They were picking flowers, making floral decorations, and playing house. Meanwhile, the rest of boys were engaged in a game of soccer. Those days spent in Serbia were the best for me. Everything felt peaceful in Serbia. As we were engrossed in our play, Sonia's father returned home from hunting. He smiled and warmly welcomed us, acknowledging the effort we had made to come all the way from our town. Her mother prepared baklava for us, a traditional Serbian sweet typically eaten on special occasions. I was curious why her mother went to trouble of making it, so I asked Sonia if it was a special day for them. Blushing, Sonia replied, "You brought so many of your friends here and gave me a chance to interact with kids my age. This is a day of gratitude for you and your friends." I had previously thought Sonia attended a different school, but it turned out she didn't go to school at all. I wasn't sure of the reason then, but soon I had a hunch as to why she didn't go to school. It was likely due to her family's economic situation. As evidence, her father would always bring back used books about child education, such as teaching writing and mathematics for Sonia whenever he went to the city center. Her mother was constantly worried that Sonia wasn't able to make any friends because she stayed at home. I lived in Serbia in the 1990s. I remember that many children in Serbia were unable to receive a satisfactory education, even the compulsory one, during that time. As the sky started to darken, he kindly offered to drive us back to our town. He always showed a kindness and a consideration towards children. Even after going back home, I kept thinking about Sonia. I had a special feeling towards her, because she was my very first friend of the opposite sex. Becoming friends with Sonia brought me great happiness, and I couldn't resist meeting her every single day. She was like my best friend, with whom I could talk about anything. Every time I visited her house, her parents warmly welcomed me, and we played both inside and outside, and her mother always prepared dinner for me in the evening. One day, while I was deeply engaged in playing with Sonia, I lost track of time and realized that the area around their house had already become dark. I hurriedly made plans to go back home, but her mother kindly offered me to stay the night at their house because it was too late to return home. At that time, I was still unfamiliar with words like hesitation and humility. In retrospect, I now realize that I was quite bold and relied heavily on their hospitality. But I understood that they treated me as one of their own children, despite my distinctively Asian appearance as a Japanese person. That night, while staying at her house, Sonia and I stayed up late and had a conversation while watching the stars scattered across the sky, visible through the window. During this night, I had the opportunity to see her entire face when she took off her hijab. Her beautiful brownish blonde hair was illuminated by the moonlight streaming in through the window. In that moment, my vague feelings of infatuation for her transformed into a clear realization that I was in love with her. We made a promise to always be by each other's sides holding hands. When I woke up, Sonia was still sleeping next to me. It seemed that I had fallen asleep on Sonia's bed while engrossed in conversation with her. Her mother came to wake us up in our room and was slightly surprised, but she gently stroked our heads, smiled, and said, "We should keep this a secret from your dad." At the time, I didn't understand the full meaning, but later I realized that there were religious considerations in Islam regarding a married man and a woman sleeping on the same bed. The following day, Sonia's father took us to a town called Foča for shopping. The road to Foča was a straight path along a range of mountains after leaving the plateau near their house. I observed many large trucks carrying logs slowly traveling on the road. Foča The town was picturesque, especially when the Drina River came into view on the other side of the bank. It felt like I was in a fantasy. We visited several stores for shopping daily necessities and had a lunch. Sonia's father also took me to a small mosque he attended once a week in the town. When we arrived at the mosque, other worshippers were present for the mosque service. I joined them and offered prayer together with the believers. It was a very enriching experience. Even after the long school summer vacation, the 8 of us would gather on weekends and Sunday when we didn't have a school to play together. Dragan always teased Sanya with words that made her angry, but it was obvious that he actually liked her a lot. One day, Sanya couldn't bear the teasing anymore and started crying. Camille, who secretly had feelings for Sanya, lost his temper and a big scuffle broke out between them. In those situations, Melvina would always step in as the peacemaker and convincingly admonish and tell them off. Even though she was the same age as us, she was like our elder sister, taking care of us whenever something bad and troublesome happened. She had 5 younger brothers, so she was used to resolving conflicts among us and finding points of compromise for those who caused trouble. The relationship and roles among the 8 of us were somehow implicitly fixed. It was like this. Camille was like the police. He had a strong sense of justice, and whenever he saw someone being bullied, even if it was just playful teasing within a mutual consent, he would get seriously angry, and sometimes wouldn't hesitate to use force. Dragan was a mischievous boy who often teased girls and quarreled with Camille. But he had a good side to him. He acted as a mood maker and brought a good atmosphere, especially when our mood was not so good. Sanya was like our quiet younger sister, silently following us wherever we went. Melvina was like a reliable elder sister taking care of us whenever trouble and quarrels arose among us. She always gave us mature feedbacks when we couldn't come to a conclusion. Mirko, Mehmet, and Kamal were mischievous, enjoying jokes and pranks, but they disliked conflict. To put it bluntly, they believed in the principle of peace at any price. So if a quarrel was about to escalate into serious conflict, they would take the side of the person in the stronger position and persuade the other person who was blamed into accepting it. Even though the cause of the conflict was caused by the person in the stronger position who severely blamed the other one in order to settle the conflict as soon as possible. But they were friendly, and they never preferred to quarrel with anyone, even when they personally got angry. My position was like a play planner suggesting where we should go, how we should play, and how we should spend our time. It was like being the manager who decided the course of action for the day. Sonia was like my sister and assistant, always recording what I suggested in front of everyone. At that time, 1 year had passed since I had come to Serbia. It was the end of June when the war started in Hrvatska, which is present-day Croatia. Croatia was one of the constituent countries of the Union of Yugoslavia at the time. I initially thought that the war had nothing to do with us, but things weren't as simple as I had imagined. The influence of the war gradually spread to the town where we lived in the form of racial discrimination. Before we knew it, conflicts among Bosnians, Serbians, and Croatians surfaced in our town. Naturally, the racially discriminatory atmosphere surrounding the town forced our classes to separate based on races. As a result, we came to unable to play with each other openly after school due to this atmosphere. The conflict itself influenced by the war was not so severe at that time, and we remained optimistic, not realizing that it would take some time to settle. So the 9 of us, including Sonia, secretly gathered in a hidden spot and continued to play with each other behind the backs of adults, even as we noticed signs of the racial conflict intensifying. We believed that the racial conflict was something for adults to deal with, and didn't think it really concerned us as children. The most important thing for us was not religious or racial differences, but simply the friendship we had with each other. We formed strongly bonds and made promises to always stick together and support each other, no matter what happened. I will briefly explain the history and background of the Yugoslav wars. The Eastern European countries, including the former Federation of Yugoslavia, were originally predominantly Christian. However, in the 15th century, when these countries came under the rule of the Ottoman Empire, Turkish people migrated to the region, and some Slavic people from these countries converted from Christianity to Islam. As a result, the percentage of Muslim believers increased significantly in Eastern Europe. This fact resulted in religious and racial conflicts that eventually led to World War I. Before World War I, the Kingdom of Serbia sought to establish Serbian supremacy to promote ethnic patriotism and emphasize religious differences. The majority of Serbian people adhered to the Serbian Orthodox Church, while Croatian and Bosnian were predominantly Muslim at that time. Religious discrimination was another underlying reason that could intensify racial conflicts between Croatians, Bosnians, and Serbians. Bosnians and Croatians had long held grievances against Serbians, and each race's strong sense of ethnic pride directly contributed to the outbreak of World War I, as is widely known. During World War II, most of the countries around Serbia came under the control of Croatia, a puppet state of Nazi Germany. Croatia had a fascist party known as Ustash, consisting of Croatian nationalists. During this time, the Serbian people faced severe persecution at the hands of Ustasha, resulting in the slaughter of millions of Serbians. Simultaneously, the Chetniks, a Serbian guerrilla force organized by Serbian nationalists, sought vengeance by slaughtering many civilians in Bosnia and Croatia. This retaliation led to a horrifying circle of ethnic cleansing in various regions, including Foča in Serbia. According to the Chetniks, the victims of the ethnic cleansing numbered 200,000 Croatians and 90,000 Bosnians. The main target of this ethnic cleansing by the Chetniks were innocent civilians in villages where many people lived. Girls and children were subjected to rape and murder, while men faced cruel beheadings. You may wonder why people resorted to such extreme violence and killing. It could be attributed to the racial conflicts that originated from the Kingdom of Serbia before World War I. However, I think the escalation of massacres and retaliations between races was primarily attributed to the racial supremacy policy implemented by the newly established Kingdom of Yugoslavia after World War I, which was previously the Kingdom of Serbia. Naturally, this policy favored Serbians and was carried over from the former state, the Kingdom of Serbia. From the very beginning of its establishment, the country was dominated by Serbian interests. Moreover, the exclusionary movements against Croatians and Bosnians were more intense than during the period of the Kingdom of Serbia. This further escalated tensions and even led to the assassination of the Croatian Peasant Party leader. As a result, Croatian resistance against such treatment, fueled by strong ethnic consciousness, became even more relentless. The Ustasha took advantage of the growing anti-Serbian sentiment to incite feelings of vengeance and racial conflict. They propagated anti-Serbian sentiments and called for downfall of the Serbian state, rapidly gaining support from the people and expanding their influence. This movement eventually led to the Croatian War of Independence and the Bosnian War, which served as a catalyst for the collapse of Yugoslavia. The Chetniks espoused the belief of Greater Serbia, claiming that a significant portion of the land in the Western Balkan Peninsula belonged to Serbia. Looking at all of this, it appears that the circle of retaliation between different ethnic groups may have been intentionally instigated by the Serbians, driven by their belief in ethnic superiority. However, I do not wish to solely blame them for the conflict. When we reflect on historical events, the Serbian people have endured persecution and suffered massacres while being under the rule of other ethnic groups. Nonetheless, seeking revenge cannot be justified. But I understand their deep-rooted emotions. They aspire to establish their own sovereignty state as a means to protect themselves from oppressive forces. Their desire for independence stemmed not from a wish to harm others, but from the fear of being victimized if they did not defend themselves. As such, I find it challenging to assign blame to any single party for the racial conflicts, especially considering that the Balkan Peninsula still bears the scars of past conflicts, with ammunition stretches scattered across the region. The ideology of Greater Serbia aimed to unify all Serbian people and their territories into one state, even if the number of Serbians in a particular region was small. It was believed that any region where Serbians lived should belong to Serbia. For the Serbian state, the ideology of Greater Serbia was essential, and they justified it with their historical proverb, "Only unification can save Serbia." During World War I, this ideology served as a driving force, leading Serbian people to fight on various fronts beyond their borders in pursuit of establishing Greater Serbia. Similarly, during these conflicts in the 1990s, they fought to maintain the unified state of Serbia. Yugoslavia's post-World War II policies continued to marginalize non-Serbian ethnic groups, further intensifying tensions among different ethnicities. Currently in Serbia, the Serbian Radical Party, a right-wing political party, advocates for the establishment of Greater Serbia, which includes not only most of Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia, but also parts of Romania, Bulgaria, and Hungary. As a result of this policy during the Yugoslav wars, the Republic of Serbian Krajina was established in Croatia, and the Republic Srpska was established in Bosnia and Herzegovina. From the perspective of the Serbian people, it was necessary to avoid being under the control of hostile forces such as the historical archenemies, the Croatians, in order to protect the rights of the Serbian people in these regions. We, the 9 of us, would realize the horrific reality of ethnic conflict.